Alright, so as you can obviously tell by the title and thumbnail of this video, in this week's upload we're going to be covering a new series on the channel, that series being Fairy Tail. And obviously the first character I want to discuss in my first Fairy Tail upload is Natsu, the protagonist of the Fairy Tail series. And the reason I even want to discuss Natsu with you niggas is because Natsu as a character, and the Fairy Tail series just in general, is very rarely talked about when it comes to the power scaling aspects of the series, with the only people I've ever seen talk about the scaling for the verse consistently being a bunch of goofy ass scalers on Instagram. And at least from what I've seen, it seems like outside of Instagram, the Fairy Tail power scaling community is almost non-existent, with practically no one on other social media platforms, specifically YouTube, talking about it. And those who do scale the series on YouTube, such as Screw Attack, often scale the series poorly in my personal opinion, and it's just sad to see, honestly. And due to this lack of good Fairy Tail power scaling within the community and subsequent lack of knowledge on the scaling for the verse, there's a lot of range for where certain Fairy Tail characters can be scaled, with some thinking Natsu and all the other god tiers in the verse cap at fucking mountain level, and with others thinking Natsu is an entity beyond all logic, concepts, and understanding. So in this video, I will not only attempt to establish just where Natsu sort of scales in his own verse, but also in relation to some other anime verses. So without further ado, let's start the video. Alright, so before I really get into the scale, I just wanted to point out that before I can explain how strong Natsu is in relation to some other anime verses, I first have to explain how strong Natsu is within the confines of his own verse. Meaning I first need to establish who Natsu is and isn't relative to within the Fairy Tail series itself before trying to use the feats of other characters to scale and even upscale things like Natsu's attack potency, speed, and durability. And just doing that is fairly convoluted, so to start, Natsu should at the very least scale massively above every member of the Spriggan 12. We could even argue he should also be relative to, if not stronger than base Acnologia, being able to combat and beat one of the Pentadrakes all by himself. The Pentadrakes being entities stated to possess a power equal to that of Acnologia prior to him absorbing the Ravens of Time. And at least according to Ignia, Natsu's brother and one of the Pentadrakes himself, they should have a power which has long surpassed that of Acnologia's base strength. Acnologia being someone who terrified both August and Irene to the point where neither of them were willing to combat him. August not even taking action when Acnologia had just brutally tore apart God Serena, another member of the 12, right in front of him. And August, after witnessing this, even went on to directly say that only Zeref could beat Acnologia after obtaining the Fairy Heart, which clearly shows that August, after witnessing Acnologia's strength, was of the opinion that he was incapable of beating him. And Irene wished to avoid a confrontation with Acnologia so much that she went out of her way to shrink the entire fucking country just to avoid him. This bitch thought it was easier to shrink part of a continent than it was to fight this nigga Acnologia. Keep in mind, Irene and August are by far the strongest members of the 12 according to their own statements and the statements of other reputable sources within the series, such as Brandish, who is also a member of the 12 and who is someone very close to August, even referring to him as her grandpa. So basically, Acnologia terrified both August and Irene and August are the strongest members of the 12. It's clear to me that Hiro Mashima was trying to make it very obvious that Acnologia was stronger than the 12 as a whole, and that Natsu is relative to him. Keep in mind, this same August who feared Acnologia stated himself capable of destroying the entire fucking world, and was even going to vaporize the entire country of Fiori, a feat which, due to the massive size of the country, I've calculated requiring upwards of 3.5 times 10 to the 26 joules of energy, or about 84 petatons of force, which is multi-continental. Fiori being an area of space which has been calced at spanning 18 million square kilometers. This would mean that the country of Fiori, the smallest country on the continent of Ishgar, would be 2 times bigger than the United States, slightly bigger than Russia, and be about 3/4 the size of the North American continent, meaning that what is damn near the smallest country on the fairy tale planet would be the size of one of our continents here on Earth. The size of Fiori alone obviously speaks volumes about the size of the fairy tale planet itself, which has actually been calculated spanning over 3.9 billion square kilometers, making it roughly 6 times bigger than Earth. And keep in mind, multiple characters in the series have been stated capable on multiple occasions of destroying the entire planet, a feat which I've accomplished. I've calculated requiring bare minimum 2.7 times 10 to the 34 joules of force, or about 6.4 yotatons of TNT, which is standard large planetary shit. Rest in peace, Luffy. And this planetary shit isn't even just statement based, as there are multiple feats which support this conclusion, such as Alderaan, a member of the Dragon Pentadrakes and a being stated planetary himself, having his casual KE or movement energy calced at planetary just due to his sheer size of 250 kilometers. His walking KE being calced at 3.7 times 10 to the 24 joules of energy, which is continental plus. Nothing to, be impressed about, because, we just talked about planetary shit. And his running KE being calced at 3.5 times 10 to the 32 through 1.6 times 10 to the 34 joules of energy, which once again is basic planetary through large planetary shit. Rest in peace, All Might. I'm sick of, don't compare fairy tale characters to fucking Luffy and MHA characters anymore. It's just not a thing. And we can even get characters like Animus, who Natsu fucking no-diff to damn near moon level, even while lowballing, just off the fact that Dragon Cry, the Dragon Cry which Animus absorbed, was stated to possess a power equal to several dozen Etherion Blast, a single Etherion Blast being capable of vaporizing an entire country. And we've already talked about just how much energy that will require, even if it was only referring to the smallest of countries on the planet. So basically what we've learned from this portion of the video is that Natsu and characters much weaker than Natsu all have the feats, lore, and statements to place them at multi-continental to planetary, even when discussing some of the lower levels of their strength. Now, let's move into a much less talked about fairy tale power scaling meta that I personally think is just fucking fantastic. But keep in mind, I'm not trying to make any objective claims here, so don't bite my fucking head off if you don't agree with what I'm about to say. I'm purposely just providing ranges for the strength of these characters while exploring every possibility for said character strength and scaling. Like what Seth the Programmer did in his Avatar video, where he said Aang was anywhere from island level through fucking outerversal. So that's all I'm doing here. I'm not trying to rank these characters or provide, scaling for these characters objectively. I'm just trying to provide ranges for their strength. That's all I'm doing. So moving on. Edgy shit here and said that the Celestial Spirit Realm arc in Fairy Tail is a canon part of the story, despite not being a part of the original manga. The plot of the arc was written by Hiro Mashima, the creator of the Fairy Tail series, and even something as small as the character designs for this arc were made by him. We also know Mashima does often reference some of these anime-only storylines within the original source material, such as the Key to the Starry Sky arc, an anime-only arc that was considered filler by most, directly being mentioned in the manga during the Grand Magic Games. Also, Mashima himself supposedly stated this arc was canon in an interview, but I have yet to confirm the credibility of these claims, so obviously take them with a grain of salt, although I personally do think it is plausible that he would make these claims, considering how much of the writing for this arc was actually done by him. But even if you don't think this arc is canon, then feel free to just interpret this video as a scale for composite manga and anime Natsu. That's something I'm perfectly fine with. So, in the Celestial Spirit Realm arc, Natsu is forced to fight his way through waves of celestial spirits, one such celestial spirit being Ophiuchus. Ophiuchus being an entity capable of creating 12 separate worlds, one of which was directly stated to have a star present, and 2 others being directly depicted with sunlight. assuming of course the distance between the star and the planet within these realms is 1 astronomical unit, or about 149 million kilometers, which the distance would kind of have to be in order for these planets to be cultivating and sustaining things like plant life, something a planet could only accomplish if it exists within the Goldilocks zone of its solar system, 1 AU being the general distance away from a star a planet needs to be to exist within said zone. And 1 AU is the distance we use for the Goldilocks zone because that's the distance between our own Earth and the Sun. And as far as we know, our planet is the only one capable of sustaining life. So moving forward, creating pocket realms of this variety is a very common feat in fiction, and as such, lots of calcs for similar feats have already been made that we can use to scale this one. And there's even a calc not tailored or made for any one specific feat of this level or type, and that wasn't made for the purpose of scaling a feat for any individual series, and instead just gives a general understanding of how much energy would be required to create or destroy a space of this size. And according to this calc, the amount of energy Ophiuchus would be required to output in the creation of these worlds would be bare minimum 8.14 times 10 to the 44 joules of energy, or about 8.14 foe of TNT, which is large star level. And Natsu was able to blatantly one-shot her in their battle, obviously showing that he is of superior strength to her. Natsu was also capable of combating the Celestial Spirit King, being capable of absorbing constellations, and who was even stated capable of destroying the entire Celestial Spirit Realm, and was even on the verge of doing just that in their final battle with him. The Celestial Spirit Realm being an area of space depicted as containing a countless number of stars, planets, and even a nebula, destroying worlds or dimensions which are depicted as having this sort of starry backdrops similar to the one in fairy tale, is a very common feat in fiction as well, and as such, we can actually calc for the amount of energy one would be required to output in order to destroy a space depicted with this sort of cosmology. And the total joule output required is bare minimum 1.1 times 10 to the 61 joules of energy, or about 140 petaflow of TNT, which is high in multi-solar system level, damn near galaxy level. Not to mention, the Celestial Spirit Realm is stated to have a different flow of time when compared to the main fairy tale universe. Now, different flows in space-time between two realms could mean that these two spaces could be composed of their own separate space-time barriers, meaning the Celestial Spirit Realm could potentially be a time-space separate from the main fairy tale universe, which would potentially equate the destruction of this realm to a universal plus feat. But as non-linear flows of time can be very common within the confines of one universe and one space-time, it's hard to say for sure, so just know that the Celestial Spirit Realm arc Natsu ranges anywhere from multi-solar system level through galaxy level, all the way up to potentially universal plus, and this isn't even the strongest form of Alright, so as I stated before, the Celestial Spirit Arc variant of Natsu is by no means the strongest variant of Natsu there is. And the reason I said this is because Hiro Mashima, the creator of Fairy Tail himself, states verbatim that Acnologia, Zeref, and even the Spriggan 12 surpass all other antagonists from previous arcs in power. This would of course include the Celestial Spirit King and all other celestial spirits. And the feats and statements presented to us within the Alvarez War arc, the last arc of Fairy Tail, do kinda support Hiro Mashima's claim that the characters presented to us within this arc scale massively above all other past antagonists in the series, as this is the arc in which we are introduced to Fairy Heart Zeref. Fairy Heart Zeref being an entity stated to have infinite magic power and to hold absolute authority over space-time. Space-time, or time-space, being a fourth dimensional construct, space-time being the fusion of one-dimensional time and three-dimensional space into some sort of 4D manifold. And in order to manipulate or destroy 4D constructs, one would require bare minimum 4D hacks, AP, or existence. Having 4D AP and or existence means to hold a power which is inaccessibly bigger or greater, or a set of uncountable infinity greater than beings with infinite 3D power. And those who possess infinite 3D power would themselves already be high universal. But if you're still confused by this whole higher dimensional shit, here's a pretty cool analogy I use to explain 4D power over on my Instagram. Roll the clip. My fucking encounter that I just shit out of nowhere. That's why I'm posting this. I basically told this nigga to grab a fucking box, like any box will do, right? I'm just using my fucking Nintendo Switch box. And I told this nigga to stack two-dimensional shapes on top of each other so they fill the entire depth of the box, right? And of course, no matter how many of these fucking two-dimensional shapes we stack on top of one another, they will never fill even a single percentage of the depth of this box, because two-dimensional shapes lack fucking depth. They have width and length, but they don't have depth. They have zero depth, right? And 0 plus 0 will always equal fucking 0, right? So basically, no matter how many of these fucking shapes I have, even if they're infinite in size, meaning they have infinite length, infinite width, no matter how many times I stack these infinitely sized, infinite fucking two-dimensional shapes on top of one another, they will fucking never be as big as this box, because they lack an entire spatial axis that this three-dimensional box possesses. And this is basically the same fucking, thing, like the same situation that transfers from 3 to 4D. Because fourth dimensional fucking shapes, or, just fourth dimensional planes or fourth dimensional anythings have a fucking spatial axis that three-dimensional shapes lack, they will always be infinitely bigger than said three-dimensional shape, even if the three-dimensional shape is of an infinite size. These statements about Zeref holding absolute authority over space-time are then further supported by his ability to cast the Neo Eclipse while utilizing the Fairy Heart, the Neo Eclipse being described as a technique which neither sends the caster back in time or to the future, but rather resets or erases however much of the timeline the caster sees fits. Things like timeline erasure are usually seen as low 2C or universal plus feats, because erasing a timeline requires the caster to destroy or reset a space-time on a universal scale for whatever portion of the timeline he's erasing, as by erasing the timeline, the caster of the Neo Eclipse is effectively undoing every change made within the universe over whatever period of time said timeline spans. It's extremely convoluted. In this arc, we're also introduced to RLT Acnologia, a being similarly to Zeref stated to have control over 4D constructs such as space-time. But unlike Fairy Heart Zeref, Acnologia is a being stated to transcend such constructs according to his own statements, potentially making him 5D or low complex multiversal. And Natsu, after absorbing, the power of the 7 other Dragon Slayers, is able to casually one-shot this Acnologia. And although this form of Natsu wouldn't even remotely scale to his normal stats, I just thought it'd be fun to talk about the strongest variant of Natsu, even if it wouldn't really make sense in the context of his actual power. So, now that we're done with part 3 of this video, let's move on into the conclusion. So, as you can probably tell, we have finally reached the conclusion of this video, and if you're familiar with some of my other videos, you can probably tell that the formatting for this video is a little bit different than most of my other videos. In this video, I broke down Natsu's AP scaling into 3 different and very distinct metas, and covered each meta one by one throughout 3 different sections of this video. The reason I did this is because I think it's better to provide ranges for a character strength-wise than it is to try and scale a character concretely and boringly, where we provide one level of power to a character while ignoring all other possibilities for that character's strength. That's why this video was so loose when it came to scaling Natsu's AP. We said Natsu was planetary, we said Natsu was star level, we said Natsu was multi-solar system level, and to top it off, we said Natsu was potentially a fucking universe buster. That's how scaling should be. But if these ranges and shit confuse you and you just want to know how strong Natsu is really, then here's how I'd reply to that. Anything below planetary is a lowball, and anything above uni plus is wank as shit. If you say Natsu power-wise falls anywhere within these ranges, then you are correct in my eyes. And once again, don't get mad at me because I said Natsu is potentially a universe buster. Because once again, I'm not saying anything in this video is objective. Just like Set the Programmer can say Aang's bald fodder ass is potentially outer fucking versal, I can say Natsu is potentially universal, right? Also, if you notice, I didn't really cover speed scaling at all in this video. Yeah, that's because I didn't have time, but here's just a quick little cover of that. Multiple characters in the series utilize lightning and light-based attacks, and as such, multiple characters in the series have reacted to and outpaced lightning and light-based attacks. So I wouldn't be surprised if characters reach the FTL through MFTL plus ranges of speed. We can get into, more in-depth speed scaling for Fairy Tail in another video if you guys receive this one well, but I doubt any of you really want to see that. So with that being said, don't forget to like and please subscribe. It helps the channel. We're growing every day, and thanks to you guys for 100 subs. That shit actually means a lot. It doesn't seem like much, but it really does mean a lot. So yeah, keep running up, the sub count and all that other shit.